Ladies and gents, welcome back to the Settlin YouTube channel, episode number 3 of our My Team Career Mode on F122. Now, before we dive in to the action, I just want to say a big thank you for everyone who showed support on the last video. It was by far and away my best ever YouTube video. So, if you've come across and subscribed and you're new to the channel and you're joining us on our F122 journey, I really do appreciate it. And if you want to see more F122 content, then get down in the description, click the link to my Twitch channel where I'll be streaming 4 times a week starting on, well, this will release on Monday, so I'll be streaming tonight, and then it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday probably this week. So make sure you head over there and drop me a follow. Now, the slight issue that we had, the previous race that we did in Bahrain was on a different build of the game. And since then I've been sent a new build, and the old game file has corrupted, and I cannot get into it. I've tried absolutely everything. So I had to redo Bahrain, and it didn't go according to plan. We now no longer have the first point. It was actually a P17 and a pretty dull race, and the car felt absolutely dreadful. So there's a lot of work to do. We have had a little bit of R&D come in, but we're still down battling with McLaren towards the foot of the table. And we've got a couple of other R&D bits that should come in before Australia with a bit of luck. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to dive in to do some practice around Jeddah. And I will see you all for qualifying very shortly. So Q1 of Jeddah, race number 2 is upon us, and we have the setup loaded. Practice felt pretty good. The car felt much better around here than it did around Bahrain. We actually ended up, I think, P5. We were the 5th quickest car in practice. Obviously, everyone was on different practice programs and different tyre sets, so we can't really look too much into that. But it was a good performance from us. The car felt good. The only issue I had with the car was just oversteering coming out of some of the corners, but we'll dive in to the first lap of Q1 and see if we can get ourselves into Q2 for the very first time this season. I'm fairly confident going into this that we would be able to put a fairly good lap together. We'll do 2 laps here. We'll have 2 different runs, one at the start, one at the end, to try and see what we can do. See, just fighting the car coming into and out of some of these corners, especially this one here. Really struggled getting the power down on this long swooping left-hander, just having to ease the throttle in, otherwise I was losing at the back end of the car and we were oversteering and all over the place really, but okay through that time. Across the curbs here, and I must admit this Jeddah track feels a lot better on this year's game with these cars. I don't know whether that's just because I'm a little bit more used to the track now or not, but the car definitely felt like it flowed around the circuit a lot better on F122 compared to 2021. And we come into Sector 3, DRS are wide open as the sun begins to set in Saudi Arabia. We all the way up to 8th gear to try and get maximum speed out of up to 204 miles an hour into the last corner. Missed the apex a little bit deep as Lewis Hamilton sets the fastest lap of 130. Little clip on the wall, just for good measure. DRS wide open. We'll get as close to the wall here as possible to come across the line. And provisionally P2, but with plenty of cars still to go. And as you can see, we actually ended up P9 once all was said and done and all cars had gone out on track. So a very good time from us, 1.9 seconds off the pace. But we dive straight back in to the final lap of Q1. And really, I probably didn't need to go out again, but I felt like I needed a little bit more time in the car, and we had the set of softs to use, so I wanted to be sure that we were going to get in to Q2. But a good first lap, a good banker lap, means that we could push here without too much risk. As you can see, the top right, the Delta was actually up through most of Sector 1 as we just try and battle the car into this tricky bit. Track limits here is always a tight one there, as you can just run yourself wide and validate your lap. They get into this long left hand, and this is where we had all of our strikes. Tried to take a slightly different line to out their power. You can just see here, just not able to get onto the power without causing some sort of oversteer, to fight the car. As it is always a battle around here, but so far so good. As we come towards the end of Sector 2, we're 3/10 up. So it looks like we are heading for Q2 for the first time in the TSI Racing car, and a big improvement from Bahrain where we struggled. And now I think we qualified P20 there, obviously in the redo of that race. Ended up P17 and the car just didn't feel good. So pleasantly surprised to see that the car felt pretty good. and we were setting fairly consistent lap times, we say, round into the final corner to compete a lap of deep again, and that's going to cost us a little bit of time. It does cost us at least a tenth, as we'll open the DRS wide again, and this should be good enough to get ourselves into Q2, P8 provisionally. P8 provisionally, it's P10, and look at Oscar Piastri just behind us as well. So both TSI Racing cars into Q2, so let's get into the Q2 action and see what we can do. We'll only go for one lap in Q2 because we didn't want to use the medium set of tyres, so one fresh set of softs in Q2. A risk, yes, but if we didn't make it through, it's not going to be the end of the world. So we'll have one lap to see what we can do. Oscar currently at P15, just ahead of us. So we'll try and give it all we've got there on the power. Nice and early there, felt really good through the first couple of corners, I must admit. Just easing the throttle through here, not quite flat, because if you do, you run a little bit wide like we did there. Across the curb there. Trying to avoid an invalidation. But a good sector one. And that puts us half a second quicker than Guan Yu Zhou in P12. Now, I'm not sure what the time is of the person in P10. It'd be nice if it showed that as the elimination, as it does with the real life broadcast of Formula 1. So that would have been nice, but it's not. So we've got to stay focused as we come towards the end of Q2. We'll have a look at that delta time again against Zhou Guan Yu to see where we are relative to P12 at least, and 6/10 up. We're absolutely flying. Oh, and a massive snap of bows. A huge correction. That could be the difference between a Q3 performance and a Q2. Surely we couldn't get into Q3 in only our second race as the TSI Racing team. We'll run it wide there. Again, a little bit deeper to that final corner. Cannot get that right at all at this race weekend, but it's now a sprint to the line. Where are we going to be? We're praying for a P10 to pop up in the bottom left-hand corner as we come across the line to take the checker flag. It is P10. It's a cracking effort from ourselves, and it is P10, and that puts us into Q3 with Mick, Magnussen, Alonso, Bottas, Hamilton, Perez, Sainz, Verstappen and Leclerc. Oscar was unfortunately out in P16, but still a good qualifying for him. So there we go. One final lap of Q3 to see where we can stick this car. I'm not hopeful of getting anywhere above P10. Sorry, I can't say that's good. Now, with the AI, obviously we know normally I run 95. We bumped it down to 90 because we knew Bahrain was going to be a struggle and we wanted to get used to it. And the AI do seem a little bit more difficult. But I guess you would say if we do end up qualifying in P10, is it just the fact that this car's suited to this circuit? Should we consider going up to 95? Get yourself down in the comments and let me know what you think we should do, whether we should up the AI again, or should we have a look at Australia and the next race to see whether it's just track specific, this, and the car was just strong around here, or whether we actually do need to bump up the AI. The fact that Oscar Piastri in Q1 was P11 along with us gives me a little bit of hope that we're not too far off, and that maybe it was track specific, but maybe we'll have a look. So you have to let me know in the comments what you think as we come in to the back part of this lap. Just a few more corners to navigate. And it wasn't the worst lap in the world. A couple of corrections, say, really trying to fight the car into and out of corners, especially to avoid any oversteer. Revving the car high. Charles Leclerc posts the fast lap with a 129. We come around the final bend. Again, a little bit deep again. Probably the best we've taken it. And on the power, nice and early. As we will open the DRS wide open, drag it to the line. Can we beat P10? I don't think it's going to be. I think it is going to be a P10, but it's a brilliant qualifying for us, and we'll absolutely take that every day of the week. TSI Racing car into Q3, P10, and that gives us a platform to build on. It is Charles Leclerc on pole, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Bottas, Schumacher, Alonso, Anderson, and ourselves. So let's get into the race.
So here we are then, welcoming you today to one of the jewels of the Arab world, Jeddah. One of the biggest cities in Saudi Arabia, second only to Riyadh, gateway to Mecca, and one of the biggest ports in the region. And now, host to the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. So let's take a look at the topographical map of the Jeddah street circuit. As you can see, a number of challenging corners for the drivers to master here. We'll see just how much the teams have benefited from their time spent in practice this weekend. And like many street circuits, this track has the potential to punish drivers that get it wrong. Let's hope we avoid any safety cars today. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position. edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Sainz, and Sir Lewis Hamilton, and Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Magnussen and Thomas, Russell, Tsunoda, Guan Yu Zhou and Vettel, Albon, Daniel Ricciardo and Lance Stroll, Gasly, Latifi, Ocon and Lando Norris starts from the back of the grid. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today? Anthony Davidson joins me once again in the commentary box, and it's fantastic to have you with us here, but I'm curious, as a man with experience out on the track, how do you stop those pre-race nerves from becoming overwhelming when you're lining up on the grid?
Well, I imagine they'll be starting to feel the adrenaline as they anticipate the rundown into turn one, a bit like preparing to go into battle. The unknown situation will bring nerves, but that's a good thing. It will keep them focused on the moment and on their surroundings as we build towards the start of the Grand Prix.
So here we go then, 5 red lights in Jeddah for race number 2, season 1. We are underway, and yet again it's a slow start from us. I cannot get the starts right this year. We need to actually stick it into the wall there. We're going to go down the inside. Or George Russell trying to avoid contact with Kevin Magnussen ahead, all safely through turn 1 and turn 2 without any issues, as we just have to get off the throttle. And now we just got to try and keep with George Russell and the Mercedes behind. We've also got K-Mag in front as we get a little bit later on the brakes. Alonso's on the inside, Schumacher the outside of him. Both Haas's up into the top 10 early doors, and Mick could be on his first points of the season through the tricky middle section of sector 1. And say we just got absolutely no grip. You can see this, the car just doesn't want to stick, and these mediums are just not up to temperature. I really struggled in practice as well to get these mediums firing. They were not my favourite tyre of choice, that's for sure. There's a little bit of oversteer we have to correct coming out of there. And what we don't want to do is what we did in Bahrain and just fall away from the pack, create a train and then just get past one by one. So we've got to keep it nice and tidy for lap 1 and then make sure we're in a good position. And once the DRS is activated at the start of lap 3, use a little bit of ERS just to get ourselves through this. We've got Vettel just behind us. Not sure what's happened to George Russell. George Russell's actually dropped a couple of positions. Vettel and Tsunoda have pipped him in the first few corners of lap 1. So we use a little bit more ERS just to try and close the gap to K-Mag and Schumacher up to as they begin to battle. And that could be a tasty battle coming up there as we are round at the final corner and to the main straight. And safely, every car through safely. All 22 of us, no incidents in Jeddah, and that is hopefully what we'll see for the remainder of this race. Don't want to be having any issues, but the car so far felt pretty good as we're into the start of lap 2. And there's Hamilton and Alonso battling up ahead. We've seen that plenty of times this season as well, so 4 cars are fairly close in front of us. So if we can just keep up to this train, we might be in a good position to claim a couple of positions as we get very close to the Pirelli boardings on the left-hand side. There's a little bit of steer there as we take too much curb and just self-serves the downforce. And again, just can't get these mediums firing as we dive forward to lap number 5. You've got Alonso, K-Mag, Schumacher all going in. It's going to be too wide going into turn 1. 3 of them vying for one place. And there's a bit of contact between K-Mag and Alonso as we get on the brakes. And we're going to try and send it down the inside now. 3 wide coming out of the first couple of corners. And as we go to turn 4, there's a little clip on the wall from ourselves. We are round Magnus and Alonso, and I'm just going to check for a bit of damage here.
Tyre condition still looking good.
Marcus says we're absolutely fine, no issues there. So we get the move done. Brave, bold driving from the TSI Racing owner. And we managed to get the job done to tee us up to P8 ahead of Magnus and Alonso. So capitalise on those 2 battling. We've got... And just as things are looking good, the first signs of reliability issues come on as Marcus comes on the radio to say there is an issue. He says it's fixed. Now, on last year's game, when that happened, they said it was fixed, but the power was definitely down, and you found yourself oversteering, understeering, and just a genuine lack of pace in the car. So it's going to be interesting to see how the delta times compare to Schumacher and Magnussen to see if that's an issue on this year's game or whether they've taken that out. Fingers crossed the car is fixed, but race 2 at lap 6, we've already had the engineer come on the radio to say we have got an issue. It's going to be K-Mac going around the outside. We're going to get late on the brakes, try and tuck ourselves into the apex. And we keep Magnussen behind us as Alonso gets Magnussen. So those two are changing positions yet again at the end of lap 6, but we are currently P8. And it's still looking okay, but we've got to hope that those engine issues do not come back to haunt us. We do have fault frequency on. So we absolutely can DNF from races as we jump forward to lap 10. No further issues, but as you can see, Schumacher has begun to drop us time-wise. So I'm wondering, as we speak about the previous issue, we now got a DRS failure, which when you're batting Alonso, who's just behind you, that is not what you want. So we've now had an engine issue, a DRS failure. We're only on lap 10 of race 2 in Jeddah. Hopefully we can keep Alonso behind us. We've got a good straight line speed compared to the Alpine, but you say Mick Schumacher's just kind of run away and gained at least 5 tenths in the last few laps. So I wonder whether we still do have a car issue, whether there is an issue with our PU. I guess we'll have to wait till after the race to see if there is an underlying issue there, whether the parts are worn or not. But fingers crossed we don't get anything else. But we now have a DRS failure as well, so we've got to keep Alonso behind us, because if he does pass us, there's absolutely no way we're going to keep up to the back of him. So 11 laps in, 11 jump lap, we've got reliability concerns all over the place. And a pit stop coming up very shortly, where we will be making our one and only stop. The medium to hard was the strategy we went for with a lap extra of fuel. So just trying to make this work. I believe it's lap 13, so in a couple of laps we will be diving into the pits to see what we can do. And hopefully we'll keep the cars behind us in check. Schumacher 2.2, Alonso right on our tail again. We have to drain the ERS. As we come round the start of lap 13, we are going to dive into the pits. Schumacher's going to do the same. Alonso actually boxed the lap before, so we're going to come into the pits and try and get the optimal turn in. Fingers crossed for a good stop, and we can keep the pressure on Schumacher and keep Russell behind. So here we go, backing the lads to get the job done here as we turn in optimal 2.2 seconds. But yet again, there is an issue. The front right, 5 second stop. The front right was slow going on again, just as it was in Bahrain. We have got serious issues with our mechanics in the pit lane. Maybe a new pit crew is required, because look at the time we've lost. We've lost 3 seconds to Russell. There's 1.4 seconds behind us. And now we've got to try and keep it. And Schumacher is now 4.2 seconds ahead of us. Alonso has undercut us. He's now 3 seconds ahead of us. We have a massive snap of oversteer. And I tell you what, the one thing I've noticed this year, I didn't really notice this on F1 2021, but when you come out of the pits, your tyres are so cold, and you just can't push on your outlap. You really just cannot push. I don't know whether that was the same in 21. I don't remember it being quite as dramatic, but it took, as you can see, it took me over half a lap to get any sort of temperature into my rears, and even now the fronts are only just heating up. So something to bear in mind for you guys when you're making your pit stops is to be easy on that outlap, because it is not easy to get those tyres up to temperature, especially this hard compounded tyres. George Russell is, I'm sure, going to go and have a look at us now. He's within a tenth as we come towards the end of Sector 2. There's the end of Sector 2. And we're a little bit wide, can't get the... Oh! And we have a massive snap, and George Russell says, thank you very much. We keep it out of the war. I'm not quite sure how, but we have to give up the position. And now Daniel Ricciardo out of nowhere. Where the hell has Daniel Ricciardo come from? He's on the medium, so I'm assuming he's got to box again. But Daniel Ricciardo now is going to send it on the inside, and it's going to get very tight and skirmish. We avoid the tech pro barriers on the outside, and now it's a drag race into turn 1. We're going to use plenty of ERS, but as is Daniel Ricciardo, and Daniel Ricciardo is going to have the inside line, and we're going to get behind him, and we're going to go for a switch down the inside late on the brakes, maybe too late, and there is a little bit of contact. It's not pretty by us, by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to check for damage again.
Please, we don't want to lose places because of a penalty. Okay, no issues.
Yeah, no issues again. It's not a pretty move. We managed to keep the place ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, but it wasn't great at all. We went for the lunge into turn 1, and it didn't quite work as Daniel Ricciardo now peels himself off into the pit. So it's now George Russell at 1.9 seconds ahead of us, and this is the lap where the tyres really started just to fire up. It took us a few laps to get them going, 3 laps to be exact, but at this point I really felt like this was where we had the window, and had we had a good pit stop, we would be comfortably ahead of George Russell. And actually, you can see at the start of the lap it was nearly 2 seconds, and we just take chunks out of our own personal best time. The Delta is just coming down the car here. This will only really lap where the car felt really, really strong through this first bit of the circuit. You can see we've taken out 5 tenths in just Sector 1 alone on George Russell. Make that 6, make that 7 nearly. And I felt here that maybe we had an opportunity, so I was giving them absolutely everything we've got just to see if we could get within the DRS range. And if we got within the DRS, then we might be able to get ahead of George Russell and stretch our lead against Kevin Magnussen, who is a further 1.5 seconds behind. But as we came towards the end of Sector 2, George Russell just found an extra bit, but the Deltas were going back and forth. But it was a really nice lap from us, and say, apart from this lap, the car didn't quite feel settled, much better than it was at Bahrain, but we gave it absolutely everything we've got. It was by far our best lap time. You see, we're nearly half a second up on our best. We've taken half a second out of George Russell's lap time as we come round the final corner. And it wasn't going to be quite enough, but it was just a nice lap that I wanted to chuck into the mix, because at one point it looked like we might gain enough. As we start lap 17, P10, so it's now, looks like it's going to be a race between us and K-Mag, and whether we can keep that man behind us. We dive forward to lap 22. The teammate behind Oscar Piastri, 9.7 seconds, so not a bad race from him, but now it's a simple math there. George Russell's gone, he's absolutely fine. That Mercedes has found an extra gear. We've got Kevin Magnussen at 1.4 seconds behind us. We've got 3 laps of this Grand Prix to go. Can we reclaim that point that we deserved in Bahrain, that we lost because we had to redo the race? Can we have a little bit of justice here around Jeddah? We've got a few laps to go, and this is where the tyres, although the tyres were only 9 to 10 laps old, they really started to feel like they were going to lose grip. Plenty of fuel, that is not going to be a concern. 1.6 seconds to K-Mag, and again we're having to shift up to 4th gear there. Super early to make sure that we don't oversteer coming out of there, but this is just going to be a simple battle. Max Verstappen posted the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. And I say, it's been a race where we've kind of just been stuck in this position for a while. A little bit of wheel-to-wheel action, but it's all going to come down to the last lap. And I really hope there is no last lap heartbreak, but Kevin Magnussen is starting to take chunks of time out of us. 1.4 seconds, 1.5 seconds. So it's getting close, but this is where that Haas has so much more straight line speed. You can see he's taken 3 tenths out of me just in this straight, make that 4 tenths. And all of a sudden, he's going to be within DRS range as we come around the final bend nicely through there. So we've definitely got the corner speed, but the Haas has got the straight line speed. As Russell gets Mick up ahead, and those two are well away. So it is going to be a final couple of laps shootout as we come through Sector 1 of lap 23. And again, big pressure from K-Mag behind us now. We squirm our way through there. Again, the brakes nice and early. Try and not make any mistake. We've got to try and keep K-Mag out of our DRS range for as long as possible. Through this trick, you can see how much I'm having to lift off through here just because I do not fancy the car making it through. Run a little bit wide there. But here we go then. Here is the last lap. You can see K-Mag is absolutely all over the back of me here. He is put so much pressure on me for the last 10 laps or so. So it's going to be a straight shootout to the line. As you can see, that I'm literally coasting through here at the minute, as I just have absolutely no grip, and we run wide yet again, as does K-Mag, though. K-Mag actually almost followed us through there. So half a lap to go, pretty much. We've got just over half a second back to K-Mag. It would be absolute heartbreak. Charles Leclerc wins the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It's 2 from 2 for the Scuderia Ferrari driver. And he's off to an absolute fly as we get a bit of oversteer there. Oh, nearly clipped the Rolex wall. Magnussen now is on our inside. This would be so cruel to lose the point on the last lap. It is going to be a point for Mick Schumacher up ahead, though, so he's had a comfortable start to the season. A few more corners to go here. We've got one long DRS straight to go. He is going to have DRS. We have got barely any ERS. ERS management is proving impossible in the first couple laps, but we're going to have to use every single little drop of that battery we've got. We've got the inside line a little bit late on the brakes. Make the apex no contact. Keep it nice and clean through the last corner. Now it's a straight sprint to the line. Can we get the point that we deserve? I think it's going to be. We finally get the World Championship point back. Justice in Jeddah.
Okay, pick up rubber and bring it home.
a drive that was to take the win for Ferrari today. Tell me, Ant, how do they manage to achieve this win?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, you can capitalise on other people's errors without making many of your own. And that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
Ferrari are at it again. An excellent performance at today's Grand Prix, and they're certainly a team that know what they're doing out there.
So there you go. There is your race winner. It is Charles Leclerc for the Scuderia Ferrari against Carlos Sainz in P2 and Max Verstappen in P3. I've got a feeling we will be seeing those three on the podium for quite a few races to come on Season 1 of F1 at 22. But there is the classifier results. It's Charles Leclerc first, and then Verstappen, Sainz, Hamilton, Perez, Bottas, Alonso, Russell, Schumacher, and ourselves in P10. Just going to have a quick look to see where Oscar came. Where did he end up? P15 for Oscar Piastri, so we'll absolutely take that, gain a position. But we finally got our point back. There are the standings. We're up to P11, the first championship point back against our name. Where we deserve this. Charles Leclerc leads the championship and Ferrari lead the Constructors' Championship. But that is going to be us for episode 3 done and dusted. I'll catch you all very shortly for the Australian Grand Prix.